This is the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. 3, 2, 1, and welcome everybody to this episode of the Coming Home Podcast. It's a wonderful Friday afternoon. This episode you'll be hearing this coming Sunday, but right now it's Friday and we live in the moment. We don't care about Sunday. It's Friday. I'm sitting here speaking with Miss Lauren White. This is your second appearance. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon to you. Good morning to me.
Yeah.
It's a little earlier here in Florida. And thank you for having me on again. I really enjoyed doing it the first time and got a lot of great feedback from my friends. Had a blast talking with you and Tiffany, even though it was 6 a.m. here.
It was early. Yes, it was early. Well, we had a great time. That was a great, I really enjoyed getting to know you. Tiffy pretty much ran that episode. That was one of the Tiffy Tuesday episodes, which will be coming back, by the way. She's a little busy with life, and
yes.
But she will be back. And here you are for a second episode. I brought you back because you have some very interesting things that interest me. Two things I'm thinking of. First is your book, Innocently Devious. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're two steps ahead of me. I'm going to be coming with a book eventually, but that'll be my first one, and this is your second.
So all of this is unplanned, right? When I did the first book,
a happy accident, as you said,
yes.
A happy accident full of raw, passionate thought. Those were your own words.
You.
Yeah.
Yes, because that's how people, when they read my poetry, that's how they describe it to me. That was never how I described it to myself.
That is a great description. Your poetry is well, it's raw and it's passionate. It's so straightforward, and yet it keeps its poetic aspects, even though it's so straightforward.
It's me.
Yes.
And I suppose I don't know any other way to write. And perhaps that's because the writing's always been an outlet. The first book, Sunshine and Whisky, was just a collection of about 20 years worth of stuff. I couldn't tell you when I started writing.
Wow.
And finally, one day, I just said, what the hell? I'll just put it all out there. That was never with the intention of writing a second book. And I sat down and decided to collect what I had written since doing the first book, because putting 20 years worth of poetry from my computer, my journals, my Twitter, everything together was a nightmare. And I said, let me not do that again. Let me start the Word document. And when I put it together, I was like, wow, I've told a story about something that I've just went through, and I sat on it. I put it together about January, February this year, and then I just stopped. And then everything went to hell. 2020 just kind of reared its ugly head. And the tab was always open on my computer. And I had originally thought, I'm going to make this little story the first part of my book. And finally, later, about July, August sometime, I started putting more poems in there, and I started dividing it up, and I realized I was writing the exact same book that I had done the first time.
Okay.
And I didn't want to do that. And so I took the poems that I had collected that I was going to make a part one that I had first put in there way back in February and said, this is really a story that can be told by itself. And that's what this book is.
Well, again, congratulations. There's a lot of people, myself included, who use a lot of time thinking about writing a book. You did it. Now, when you're talking about this being, or your first book rather, being a collection of 20 years worth of writing, I can imagine that was quite the emotional journey for you to go back and look at things that maybe you had forgotten, or at least maybe things that were pushed back in your conscious mind. And then here you come again to kind of dig it up again and revisit it.
It was a little of that, both from a personal standpoint, but then also from skill. I don't like to, how do I say this? I don't like to read myself in the same way I don't like to watch myself on camera. You know, I've done a couple of fan films, Star Trek fan films, and I don't want to watch them. I don't want to see myself on camera. And it's the same way with my poetry. I go back and I read it. Half the time I wake up in the morning and I go look at my Twitter and I'm like, what was I thinking last night? And I have all these comments from people like, Lauren, oh my God, this was beautiful. I'm like, really? Because I just was spewing garbage in a moment. But I think that's the thing. And
well, a lot of writers distance themselves almost immediately once it's written. I do that with my music, my lyrics. I write it, and then it's almost, if I go back and hear it again, if I hear it on the radio or I revisit it in the studio, it's almost as if someone else wrote that, and now I am an outsider. I'm the listener interpreting what was written.
Well, it's your inhibitions coming out, right?
Yeah,
and that's the part of ourselves that we are probably most scared of.
Is it
as a child?
Is it a self-confidence thing?
I think it is. I think that's part of it. And for me as a child, I was very shy. I was very quiet. I didn't talk to a lot of people. I didn't really talk to you if I didn't have to. I was not very happy. And I wrote, and people always said to me, when you did talk, though, it was something you meant. Like it was, you were serious about it. It was something you wanted to say. And this usually resulted in me being in trouble. So I think the writing, between the poetry and the journals that I have everywhere still, it was just a way to get out all the things that I couldn't say. So, there may have been, when I went back into middle school, high school days, there was some of that flowery stuff that everybody tries to write. And then later you're like, oh my God, no. From a skill standpoint, I tended to be very verbose.
Okay.
And that 130 character limit on Twitter will teach you how to tone it down just a bit, take out all that superfluous wording that you don't need. And so that is something that I saw going back when I went through some of my older ones. That very first poem in the book, I cut out this word, that word, that word. And one of my high school teachers, Anne Clayclone, she was my English literature teacher, English language. And I worked with her on a literary magazine. That's advice she gave me years ago that I've tried to remember, is don't put in all these words that you don't need, that don't add to it. So there was that, just realizing, okay, I need to write better. But then there was just all this pain in it. And while it was at different portions of my life, I feel like it was different types of pain, from, being a child, then moving to, first job, moving to a different state, going through relationships and breakups. They were different sorts of pain that I was trying to get out while also understanding myself. And
is that maybe why it's hard for you to revisit it? Because it's plain and simple. It's pain. Is it almost as if you're feeling that you're reliving it when you go back and read that?
Well, I don't think I need to reread it to do that, because I'm very good at re-traumatizing myself.
Oh, congratulations.
I just, and this is something that we were probably going to get to later, but I just did an evaluation for autism spectrum disorder.
Yes, and that was the second thing I wanted to ask you about. Yeah.
So I was speaking with the examiner about my doctor suggesting, this is the first doctor that has suggested to me that I have PTSD. And it's very strange, because people tend to associate PTSD with military or sexual abuse or some deeply seated sort of trauma, something deeply significant. And there isn't anything that I have that really compares to those experiences. But I was just relaying an event to her, and she said, I'm watching you re-traumatize yourself because I relive it that way, just talking myself through it. So the poetry is actually, I think, a way to heal from that, to get it out. And when people are dealing with things, and I think I have said this to you, I tell folks, write it down. My friend is having relationship issues with her husband. There are things that she wants to say. I tell her, write it down, get it out of your head, because she's like, I don't know how to approach the conversation. Write it down. There are people that contact me on Twitter because what I write is so honest, and that's me trying to get my pain out of my head. There's usually some liquid courage involved in that. And that's where I say, the inhibitions that we are hiding from within ourselves get out in our words and our lyrics and our music. And then later you're like, oh my God, did I show that to people? Yeah. But that's what we need, right? That's what people want to see. And so people have contacted me because it resonates so much with them. And they say, can I just talk to you? Because I feel like you'll get it. And I tell them, write it down, do a journal, do something that puts it on paper and gets it out of your system. And a lot of the time that's therapeutic and cathartic for me.
Sure.
To not even write a poem. I've sat down many a time to journal, and sometimes I can't do it. I have found, and you've probably found this with music, with writing lyrics, is you have the intent in your mind to go do something and you're just not ready. It's just not there yet.
Yeah.
And I've sat down a journal and say, you know what? No, my mind is not ready to purge it quite yet.
Yep.
And then I've sat down not knowing what to write. And I've written an essay that I might even be proud of at the end. And that's what my blog has become. My most recent blog posts are
very well written, by the way, that most recent post. I'm going to link.
Thank you.
I'm going to link to that when I post this episode. I want to link to that so that my listeners can check that out, because it was a beautifully written piece.
Thank you.
You're
so
welcome.
That was the I have autism post. And I had been, I got the diagnosis just a week ago, just this past Friday. And I went through a gamut of emotions, definitely. And I wanted to write about it. And I sat down to do it. And I was like, nope, not ready. And then the next day I was like, nope, not ready.
Before you talk about Before you talk about the process of writing about it, let me back you up a little bit.
Sure.
Let's talk about the process that led you to going in to speak with a doctor about what eventually became this new diagnosis. Tell me about that. What led up to that doctor visit?
I have been dealing with my mental health since about 20. I'm 34 now. And I like to say mental health now vice mental illness, because it's just...
It sounds better.
It sounds better.
And it's more inclusive, and I believe that it takes away some of that stigma.
Yes, some of the negativity with it.
Yeah.
So I would say maybe around 16 or so is when I figured out something is wrong. Just something's not right with my feelings, the way that I am dealing with things. And I thought depression was the issue.
Okay.
But of course, we grew up in a culture where we don't talk about that. Right. And it's only in the recent years that people are getting a more, they're speaking about it more, advocating for it more, and especially now during 2020 where people now get it because they're dealing with it, stuck in homes. And it's like, oh yeah, this is a real problem.
This is a thing, yeah. And I want to say for the listeners, it's also something that is even more of a stigma, of a negative stigma in the Black community.
For sure.
Black folks are just known for not talking about mental health. Unfortunately, it's a sad thing. But I agree with you. I do believe it's getting better, both in the Black community, but in the community, period, in the world, period. It's becoming more normal to speak about.
And me and my best friend Kyle were actually just discussing that a week or so ago, and I was discussing it with my mother also. Culturally, you don't talk about it. it's like, okay, so do you need a beating so you can feel better? And then and then we say that to laugh, but it's actually
a thing. That's a thing. That is a thing.
It's true. Yeah. It's just, you'll be fine. Like, ADD, all that stuff. Like, you just need a beating. You need some discipline, and you'll be fine.
Quote, knock some sense into you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Have you heard that before?
Oh, plenty of times. My parents are from the islands. We're a little more serious. So it wasn't until I was about 20, I was talking with my mom, and I had completely shut down. And actually, for the year prior, I was just like, all right, how do I take my life today? Like, that was my wake up in the morning thought process.
And when you say shut down, do you mean had you isolated yourself from family and friends? Were you working at that time? What do you mean? What do you mean by shut down?
I was doing my undergraduate degree. I was barely making it through. I wasn't talking to anybody, wasn't doing anything. I was still living at home. I pretty much just stayed in my room. And, my mom and I were talking about it. And I was like, Mom, I need to see somebody. And she's like, all right, do that tomorrow, please. Yeah. And so that's when we first got the major depressive disorder diagnosis. And one of the things that I tell people about seeing doctors is that it's not a quick process. When you first go into it, you don't understand it, and you don't know how to be honest with yourself yet. You don't know how to talk about the things that are bothering you, and you don't know what all of those things are. So
that could be a tough discussion. You're sitting there in front of a doctor, a psychologist, for example, and you're there because you're not feeling right mentally. But how do you put words on that? Especially if you are in a environment where it's not normal or it's not very accepted to speak about it. So how do you do that then with this stranger, this doctor?
Right.
It's not easy.
It's a process.
It's
a process that, especially when you move. I've moved several times, so I've seen new doctors, new therapists, and that's why I tell folks, keep going. It's not easy at first, but until you get to the point where you can bring all of your honesty into it, you're not going to get the full benefit of it, but you have to grow into that. So when I moved back to Orlando and I found a new therapist about 3 years ago that I've been seeing, that was the first time I walked into the office. I printed out some raw letters that I had written. I pulled some journaling that I had done. I came in the office, I gave that to her, and I said, here is everything that we have to deal with. That was the first
that's
time.
One way to do it, yeah.
Because other times I would go in, I say, okay, there's this thing, but I don't want to talk to you about it yet. Like, I'm not ready. And at least this time, we may not have gotten around to talking about it yet, but we know what's on the table, and I can reference it, and she can say, Lauren, we need to talk about this.
Okay.
And you got to bring an honesty to it in order for these things to come out. So what we've dealt with mostly for the last 14 or so years has been the depression. And every other doctor I have seen has said, you have ADHD. And that made no sense to me because I was always very driven in school, always went through, my work, never had any issues with that.
So what do they base that on? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Watching me talk and listening to things that I say, how, I say to myself, well, if I care about it, then I do it. If I don't care, I don't want to do it. And they put all that together and they're like, Lauren, you have ADHD. I'm like, no, I don't. And the first time I got one of those medications that you can take as needed for ADD, and I read a page in a book the first time all the way through without rereading the same paragraph 4 times because I hadn't processed any of it because I had checked out and started daydreaming. I was like, yo, this might be a real thing.
Yeah. Well, it manifests itself in so many different ways. A lot of people, when they think of ADHD or ADD, they just think of the hyperactive kid who can't sit still. Yes. But there's different, especially as an adult, there's so many different ways in which that diagnosis can manifest itself.
And I'll add a clarifier to that. They think of the hyperactive boy.
Yes. Yes.
Not the daydreaming girl.
Yes.
And so that's me. I'm a daydreamer. I will realize that I've been standing in the same spot for 10 minutes and I've been thinking about something, and I'm gone. I've been totally out of it. And I've done that while in conversation with people. They're like, "Did you just go away?" And I'm like, Did I answer your question? Because I heard it. I heard it. And so sometimes I have to stare really hard at people in probably a very creepy way, because I'm trying to listen and process what you're saying. And there are times where look, I'm so sorry. I didn't hear any of that. Yeah. And I need you to go back and tell me again. So the ADHD, I have not, I've known about it, but I haven't really, I'd say, been able to process it until this last year or so to really see it in myself.
I see.
And
but you see it, do you see it in yourself now?
I do. And that might be, medications more properly regulating some of the other things. And I was talking to my doctor. I did an interview recently, and it was funny to me that I was so, standing up straight. They asked me questions that I was not prepared for. I was able to answer them articulately and eloquently. Like, I killed the interview. Yeah. That sounds narcissistic, but I did. Like, I knew I did really well on it. And then 3 days later, I'm talking to her and I couldn't find words. I was trying to order something off a menu and I'm trying to think of a word, and I'm kind of just looking all around and I just could not focus.
So is that the ADD then manifesting itself?
Yes. And, and she's like, "I can see it on you right now." But the thing that I'm learning from talking with the doctors and reading about girls and women is it's a little easy for us to accommodate and mask and figure out the way that we need to be in certain situations and portray that confidence and sort of, hyper focus, bring it to the table for a moment.
It's almost to your detriment that you are so tough. And when I say you, I'm talking about all women. Women are so tough and adaptable, much more so than men. When men have to adapt and it gets too hard, we act out. We get loud, we get violent. But you guys seem to be able to manipulate yourselves navigate yourselves through the situation, and you end up at least for a while, in a situation that you can cope with, and it's masking the struggle because you guys are so adaptive.
And it's exhausting.
Sure, sure.
And that's when the monster comes out, when you're just tired. And that's what I refer to it, because sometimes I feel like there's just this little monster hiding in there, and when I just lose control for a moment, like that evil person. So
you were around 20. You're working on your graduate degree. You speak with your mother. She says, "Yeah, go ahead and see a doctor." You see a doctor, and originally it was about depression. Mm-hmm. And then, now how long was it after that before the ADD diagnosis came?
Actually, the first doctor I saw told me that at that time.
Okay. So you got the diagnosis of depression and ADD immediately.
Yes. Okay. I just didn't really deal with the ADD, and every medication that they have for it raises my blood pressure and my heart rate. So I can't take it. So it's just one of those things that I've learned to deal with. And
I see.
If I check out of conversation with you, I'm sorry.
Well, is it easier for, you're doing fine in this conversation. Is it easier to do something like this over video, long distance? I'm not there in front of you. Would this be a different flow of conversation if I was sitting right there with you across a table?
It depends. It depends on what we're talking about. And my doctor actually, she actually recommended a podcast for me to listen to. It's by
the Coming Home podcast with John Allen.
Her name is Tracy Otsuka, I believe, and it's called ADHD for Smartass Women. And I've listened to a couple episodes of that, and it's funny listening to the podcast and being around that group of women in a private Facebook page, because they'll say, "Does anybody else do this?" And I'm like, "Wow, it's not just me." And see, I've lost my train of thought, like telling you about that, because I'm thinking about three different things. And so it's just listening to the other women in there talk about the experiences. What did you ask me, John?
No, I guess if we go back a couple of minutes, what I was getting at was the timeline where you were 20, you get the diagnosis, depression and ADD. And
it came back. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No, I got it. And there was my little ADHD moment for the world to listen to. You asked me
live
what it would be like if you were here.
Yes. Yeah. Because
I care about this conversation. So it's easier for me to check in and listen to. And that's one of the things that she talks about is like when you're interested in something, you got that like switch on and you're hyper focused on it, and then you don't care.
Yeah.
And it's like gone, and she kind of compares it to a light switch. You're utterly obsessed and then you don't care. Yeah. And that's with me. I've noticed with certain topics, you get me onto movies or music or something, I just start rambling like an idiot.
Yeah.
And then other times I'm looking at people and I feel bad about this, but I'm like, I just don't care what you're saying. Like, I don't hear it. I'm trying to listen.
I would imagine, speaking for myself, when that happens to me, and believe me when I say this, I mean, I if I'm speaking with someone that I truly care, I want to listen, but sometimes I can't. And then this negative spiral starts going around because, oh my gosh, I'm being such an ass. I should be listening to this person. And I'm going through that process while their mouth is moving and words are coming out of their mouth. But I'm in my head like, oh my God, why can't I follow this conversation? Why can't I give this person? And it's a weird inner conversation that blocks out the outer conversation with that person who is there.
And we probably all do that to some extent, like just kind of check out a conversation. It's, for us, it's a little,
so how much,
a little more emphasized?
Yeah. Okay. So that's the dividing line then, because I was going to ask how much of that is normal human behavior and how much of that is ADD or ADHD. Do people, some people would say that diagnosis is over-diagnosed. It's an easy go-to for that person who is a little bit more active in their mind, a little more creative, a little more focused on things, a little more passionate, if you will. What do you say to that?
And like I said, that's maybe why it was hard for me to initially understand, because that would be what I would say to the doctor. I'm like, well, I just don't care about that. Right. That's why I can't pay attention. But now when I go back to all the nights that I stayed up till 2 a.m. doing my homework and getting up at 4 a.m. in high school to do my homework. And then college was just so difficult for me to go through because I never had to study. In high school. So when I had to actually sit down and study for my engineering exams, I didn't know how to do that. And
wow. So
teleworking has been difficult for me. I personally try not to telework because it's easier for me to be in the office, have the structure, and be around people. Whereas the other day, I got my office together finally. I was sitting at my desk, and I'm working and I'm like, oh, there's a spot on the floor. I should go clean that up. And then I sit down and I do something, and then I get up. And before I realize it, like I've spent 5 or 10 minutes doing something around the kitchen, and I'm like, go back to work.
So
and then I'm working.
Need that office,
and then
you need that office structure.
And
See,
I
I'm the
realized,
opposite.
okay, you're not. I was distracted by literally everything because I kept stopping and just looking around the house and just like doing all this other stuff. Another thing I've realized and learned that other women do is the daydreaming. Like I'm in my head way down the road in my little fantasy land with this person having this made up conversation about something, and when somebody posted it, I was like, oh my god, it's not just me. I've created this whole other world in my head, and so I'll be lost in there for a while.
So you've accepted that diagnosis of ADD then?
For sure. And
now you have.
It's a little misleading that it's all now under the ADHD blanket, which it's a little frustrating that they're changing the DSM-5 to blanket a lot of these terms now. So kind of getting back to the little journey here is that we've had the depression disorder, we've had the ADD disorder. Several years later is when my anxiety began to be more manifest, so it was general anxiety disorder. And then now we maybe understand that that's maybe PTSD anxiety, because you got a little PTSD, little OCD, a little all of that falls under the anxiety umbrella. And I started seeing this new doctor because my problem with psychiatrists is they tend to be pill pushers, right?
Yes.
You go in for 10 minutes and it's like, how are you doing? How are you doing on your meds? Okay, well, why are you feeling that way? Well, stop feeling that way. Well, let's raise your prescription. Come see me in 3 months. And they just don't have a lot of sympathy or good bedside manner. And I usually end up more angry, ironically, when I leave a psychiatrist's office than when I have gone in, because right. I feel like a number, like when you go to the ER and they're just trying to push you out. So my friend really, really liked this doctor, and I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And
can I ask, male or female doctor?
She's a female doctor.
She is a female. Okay, yeah. Yes, female. I used too many words there. So you're a writer, correct? Yeah.
Hey, I have my moments. That's what proofreading and Word is for.
That's what editors are for.
Yes. And what was funny is my friend said to me, she fixed me right away. Okay. And she really, really hyped her up, and she was scared that I wouldn't like her because she had hyped her up so much. I'm like, no, I actually think she's really cool. But what was funny is that, what I really like about her is that she's not one of those ones to immediately throw a diagnosis at you. She wants to hear the history and spend the time getting to know you and really understanding you. And about 3 or 4 visits in, she said, you perplex me. And I'm like, oh, damn, I perplex a psychiatrist. What? I'm just weird. Nobody can figure me out, because I'm like, the psychiatrist is looking at me like, I don't get you. I'm like, well, just get in line. So she said to me, she loves my personality, which I really appreciate. She's like, you're very logical, very systematic, very pragmatic. I love the way that, you speak, and, you're just no BS. And so she said, I am thinking high functioning autism, because I'm also looking at the ways that you interact with people, your social interactions, your romantic life, and how it's just like in my words, I'm going to say a failure in so many ways. And she said, I could argue for or against it. And I said, okay. And I had actually thought about it before, because, engineers, we're probably all on that spectrum somewhere. Uh-huh. And me and my friend kind of joke about that.
And we're talking high functioning autism, correct?
High functioning autism. So what would initially, or before, I think 2011 or so, would have been referred to as Asperger's syndrome. But now we just have autism spectrum disorder, and you have level 1, 2, and 3. So she suggested high functioning autism, gave me some things to read, gave me a checklist, and I actually happened to be home in Maryland when I did that checklist, and I went through it. And I looked at how many things I circled.
Yeah.
And
eye-opening experience?
It was terrifying. I gave it to my mom, and I said, Mom, can you read this? And she came up to my room, and she just kind of was like, yeah, that's you. and my first thought to myself, and that I said to her, was, I can't fix that. And with everything else, I felt like with depression, with anxiety, I can learn skills, I can cope, I can medicate, I can do something to get my head right.
Right.
And with that, I was like, I can't fix that. That's just me. And so my mom was like, so now we figure out who you are and how we embrace it. And I did that for the next couple of weeks. I was like, all right, maybe this is why everybody thinks I'm weird or not normal. But
there wasn't a period of sadness or frustration or anger when you found out?
Not yet.
Okay. This is very recent now. This was what, last
Well, when that doctor that I see regularly first told me that was back in October.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, so maybe, and I think I knew the answer. And I was like, all right, I'm going to start hashtagging neurodivergent and talk about not being normal and all my quirks. And I'm totally going to be all about this, like love my weird and find inspirational quotes and all that BS, But when I saw my doctor again, I said, are you still on the fence, with that diagnosis? And she says, I am. And one of the things I appreciate about her that she said to me is, she's like, you're very accommodating of life. And then she also admitted that being a doctor, she can accommodate the way that she talks to people. And having known me for several months now, she's like, I might be accommodating your social interaction and your way of speaking. And it was also very hard for her because she's like, I think you're awesome. I think the way that you talk to people is great. I love that you're pragmatic. It just might not work in all situations. And she said, if you really want to know, if you need that yes or no answer, do the eval. Well, I'm an engineer. Of course I wanted to know.
Sure.
I'm like, no, I need a yes or no answer. Like, I can't just live with a maybe in my head.
And that's a bit of a process. It's a series of tests and whatnot that takes quite a while to get through, right?
It was about 7. I think I had to do about 7 or 8 personality tests that the doctor sent me. And this particular examiner is also one that specializes in autism in women, because a lot of people don't understand that. And it's harder to diagnose. And from what I understand from my doctors, not only is it less diagnosed in women, as we were speaking about earlier, it's less diagnosed in Black people.
I spoke with, I had a podcast episode a couple of months back with a lady from Ohio, around my hometown in Ohio, Maureen Keating. Shout out to Maureen. And she's had quite the fabled career working with women who are addicts and different levels of addiction. And she is one of the pioneers who has brought it out into the open, and it has actually become accepted that women addicts need a different type of treatment than men addicts. So there is a significant difference with different medical diagnosis, and then with these social issues as well, such as addiction. And I can easily see that there's a difference between autism in men and autism in females. Absolutely.
And there's a certain point where you think, well, this is just how I am, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm a Black woman. I'm an engineer. So I'm in a white male dominated field. I've had to learn to hold my own. People tell me you're the most confident, strongest person I've ever met. And I look at them, I'm like, I don't know who you see on a daily basis.
Do you take compliments well?
I don't.
So when someone gives you a compliment, do you actually say that? Do you actually say something like, oh gosh, I don't know what you see? Or do you say, oh, that's nice, thank you?
I'm trying to get better about not saying the first thing.
But do you at times actually voice your disagreement with them?
I do. Or sometimes I just look at them and I'm like, okay.
Can you get a compliment and feel good about getting it, or does it make you uncomfortable?
I would say more often than not, it makes me uncomfortable, depending on what it is. Now, you complimenting me on my writing was okay. Great, I'm glad, but that's also because I have this fear when I write. I know that I'm doing stream of consciousness. That's just how I write. That's how I write my poetry. I don't think a whole lot about it. I just get it out. Yeah. So when you say that to me, I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Like, that's more of a relief reaction to your compliment. Like, okay, it's good.
But you must have times. Yeah, I was going to say, you must have a certain amount of confidence, though, because you do it. You do write. So you must have some confidence that it's working out, that it's going to be accepted, that it's that there's some quality to it. Am I right? I mean, you must have some kind of...
I do now. Okay. Now that I understand that people like it. When I first did it, it was an outlet. It was like a personal project to get out of my head.
Was it hard to put the book out? Was it...
Well, I started with a blog. And with Twitter. And I met a lot of poets on Twitter and got some blog followers. And then people liked my poems and asked me to join Twitter poetry groups. And then I got more followers and put out books. And I'm like, wow, people actually like this. And that wasn't something that I had initially been prepared for. Okay. And I've had people that's just say, you're like a light in the room. People gravitate to you. And that's hard for me to hear. And it's funny because I've had the same mentor since about 2009. And he does not like to talk about himself. Okay. And he doesn't like personal attention. And he freaks out a little like with compliments. So we always talk about me. But I poke at him. And I'll be like, hey, how's this? What's going on? And we've grown. I say that's one of the things to come out of this year that's made me so happy is how much our relationship, even after almost 12 years, has grown so much. And I'll give him a compliment or I'll say something really nice and meaningful. And I'm like, Mark, I can hear you cringing like on the other side of the phone. And I say to him, I'm like, remember a few years ago when you told me that like people gravitate toward me in the room and people really like me and maybe I'm really a cool person? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, I'm going to tell you that right now and just say thank you. And he's just like, oh, so it's funny to figure out how similar we both are in that aspect. And so while going through all of this, I'm like, hey, dude, so how does high functioning autism sound to you? And he's like, and I give him all the stuff to read and we talk about it. We share music and talk about everything else. Like he's grown to be one of my best friends. So he's one of the few people that I was talking through going through this process. Yeah. So there's about 8 personality tests that I had to do.
That takes a while.
It did. And some of the questions make me laugh because they weren't things that I would think about being assigned as autism. So, for example, a question might have been, you don't understand the euphemism, he wears his heart on his sleeve, right? I understand it.
Yeah.
I just hate it. And so I didn't understand
it's a little
that
gross, actually.
I can't stand sayings like that. And I said that to the examiner. People say things like, kill two birds with one stone. And in my mind, I'm like, well, that can't possibly work because you'd have to like throw the stone at like a certain projectile and velocity in order to hit the one bird in a way that it can projectile to the second bird, or you just take a rock and you kill both of them at the same time. Like, that's the only way that works. I'm like, stop saying that to me.
So is that overanalyzation of these sayings? Is that a sign then of some level of autism?
Yes, the sayings like that, because I guess I'm so pragmatic and so literally thinking, I'm like, I know what you're trying to tell me. I just wish you wouldn't say it to me that way because you're making me mad.
I get so irritated when people say, hear me out. And I don't know why, but that bothers me.
I think we all have our things that are just like, I don't like that you just said that.
It's like, hold on, John, hear me out. And I cringe when I hear that. And
So there were a few questions like that with the euphemisms, like, and I think back through that as a child. I used to have a bit of a rant. I say, so if you're beating around the bush, you're not making your point. So if you make your point, are you beating the bush, and why? And if I bury the hatchet, at that point that I'm burying it, it's because I've already killed you and I'm trying to get rid of the incriminating evidence. Okay. And then, just my mom loves to say, this weather is for the birds. And I would always say to her, I'm like, but Mom, it's winter. The birds leave. Like, I don't understand.
And that is a saying that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. This weather is for the birds. Okay. What kind of standards do these birds have then?
So I'm going through all these tests and I'm like, okay, like there's a problem here. And for the most part, I couldn't see the results of it, but there was one exam that gave me the results immediately that I had to print out. And I was above threshold in every single category. And so I was like, okay, holy crap. And I sent it to my best friend, Kyle, and I was like, dude, take this test. And so he took it and he was like, I should take that. I'm like, all right, take it. And then he was fine. And I'm like, see, dude, like there's a thing going on. Yeah. And then the other thing that I just want to mention, kind of as a side note, is a lot of folks don't take insurance anymore. And the thing with mental health, like I've been fortunate to have an engineering career and keep my job as an essential employee to my company.
I was going to ask you about that.
Pandemic.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
So I have my benefits and I have a good salary that has allowed me to get what I need through this year. And teleworking has made it easier for me to do more appointments and work my schedule around that. A lot of people don't have that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I pay $250 a session to see this psychiatrist because there's no insurance.
$250.
Getting this evaluation was $900. And that's because I didn't pay the additional $500 that I could have done to do a full report. It was $900 to do a 3+ hour examination and have like a 2-3 page summary report, which hurt.
I can imagine.
But, how many people are there that can't do that? And so have no choice but to not know because you can't afford it. And so that's something that I wish that we would work on. If you don't take insurance, fine, but to charge that amount to have people learn about, their health and what they need to move forward with it is very unfortunate.
There's something wrong with that system. That's something that I've ranted about for quite some time. It's an eye-opener to live outside of the United States and see what other nations are doing. And it's not this big problem. It's not something that takes your freedoms away. Quite the opposite. I am so much more free to live my life because I'm covered by a universal, let them call it a socialist healthcare system if they want, but it's just a humane system is what I call it. Wow, $900 to find out what you need to do to make your life better. There's something inhumane about that.
Yes.
But again, you are blessed to be in a situation where that wasn't that much of a burden on you that you couldn't do it. You were able to do it.
I was able to do it, and I really liked the doctor. I would have been more upset about it if I didn't like her.
Yeah.
But not everybody is able to do that, and that's something that we need to change.
So how did she break the news to you then? You take these tests, and then did she evaluate the results and then get back to you, or how did that work to get the
she did the examination like you would do it with anybody. Like if you brought a child to do an evaluation, she sat me down and it's like, talk. Yeah. Tell me what you were like in school. Tell me about your experiences. And it was actually weird for me to go back to elementary school and think about my interactions with people, how it's always been so difficult for me to make and keep friends, how I talk kind of roughly to people unintentionally. I've always had a problem with people.
What does that mean? You talk roughly to people?
I've always had a problem with tone. And so I'll say things and I'll look at the way people react and I'm thinking, I understand why you're reacting this way because I meant it this way, but you seem really upset right now, or you've taken it a very different way. And so I've gotten into rifts with people because of that. Because I always speak very straightforward. Yeah. And that's caused me some rifts with people in the workplace because I don't know how to be different with a entry-level employee and an executive employee. I'm just me. And some people find that to be refreshing. Yeah. Other people, when I first started working are like, Lauren, you need to tone it down just a little, maybe don't talk to people so forwardly. And I'm like, but that's hard. Like, why do I have to sugarcoat things?
They're asking you to change your personality. They're asking you to change how you because the way we express ourselves is very much an indicator of who we are. I mean, it is who we are. This is how I express myself, and you want me to change it. How do you react? How did you react when you were hearing things like that?
Well, I didn't understand that it wasn't common, because I also spent the first 20 years of my life not really talking to anybody. Right. So I was definitely, a little unprepared, untrained in that manner. And I wrote a little essay on that. It's actually the first blog post I did on my website. I just wrote about words, how I didn't really use them at first, and so nobody really knew how I was feeling or what I was thinking. Right. And then when I did use them, I didn't quite know how to, and so I still have that battle with people, and it's one that continues to exist. My mentor and I were talking about this. He's like, people are 80-20 about honesty. They like it 80% of the time until that 20% where you're talking about them. And so I guess part of the autism is I don't always filter that. I don't know. I wouldn't even say that I don't know how to. I think there were points where I didn't, and now I just don't care because it's too hard.
I see.
And I'm like, can we skip all the steps where I try and make you feel okay about what I'm about to say? and like, let's just get through this so that we can make a plan. And so, I'm telling her all these things. I go through my last 3 relationships. Like, I dated 3 guys in the last 3 years. I don't call them exes because we didn't quite make it to that point. But I always have, because I connect with so few people. I meet these guys and there's a whole lot of intensity at first because that's how I am. Like, I'm honest and forward, and it starts with this intensity, and it's great. And they never break things off because there's something wrong. I meet guys and they're like, you're different. You're not normal. You're special. I can't do this. And then it wrecks me for months.
Because that's a direct rejection of who you are.
Yes.
So that hurts.
And it's hard to deal with, especially the last guy I was with who prompted that second book. He was one of those people that he just saw me immediately. Like, he saw everything I was hiding, and it just like wasn't enough, so I struggled with that, and I'm talking to the examiner about it, and she was she's like, "He sounds like a narcissist," which is something I didn't realize that I had been drawing myself to, as a result of some of these things. So there are all these things in my life that, in my social interactions that she was listening to, that I didn't realize were a result of this. And so by the first hour, she said, "I'm pretty confident you have autism." And I said, "Okay." And then we talked for about 2 more hours.
Now, this is before you took that battery of tests.
This is after. This is when I was in her office.
So you had taken the tests, and she had seen the results, and then you're having this conversation.
Yes, in the office, so she can actually see how I interact.
Yes.
And then she had me do a series of tests. We did an IQ test, and
you probably got pretty high IQ, I would say.
Well, she told me that it was like 120 something or whatever, like 92 percentile, and I just looked at her. I'm like, "Really?" And she said, "Are you surprised with it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't think I was that smart." And she goes, "You're very intelligent." I'm like, "No." And it's funny because I looked at her and I said, "But I didn't get that question," because I was mad at myself for not getting the answer to that question. And she said, "But you got this one, and nobody ever gets that." And I'm like, "Okay." And then she said, "Well, actually, I rescored it and it's 88 percentile." I was like, "Whatever. You told me 92, so I'm keeping that one."
Keep the high number.
And then, it was actually more of like a child's test, like pick the one that's different. And, out of these 6 images, and I looked at it and I would pick one and she'd be like, "No." And I'm like, "What do you mean no? That doesn't make any sense." Like, I was arguing with her about some of the answers to the test and she'd be like, "Yeah, that actually doesn't make any sense." I'm like, "Yeah, it doesn't. That's wrong. I disagree with whatever answers they gave you." So at the end of it, it was, you have level 1 autism, which is the high functioning. You don't need the supports that other people need. And that's one of the things with autism, is that people tend to think of it in terms of children, because that's typically when it's diagnosed, when it's nonverbal, when it's behavioral. And so they don't look at a woman with the traits that I'm exhibiting, who's got a pretty successful career and has done all these other things, and go, "You have autism." And I told my friend, who has 3 boys, 2 of whom are autistic. I told her, "So I might have autism." And she's like, "What? No." She's like, "I've never, ever thought of you that way, Lauren." I'm like, "Yeah."
Will this change your life at all now that you have this diagnosis? Has it brought about some sort of understanding? Will it change your path at all?
I think there's a few different things that can come out of it.
Yeah.
I looked at the examiner when she said it to me, and I said, maybe I'm just doing it wrong. Because she said the manifestation of my autism is social interactions and the ability to sometimes inability rather, to sometimes control my emotions. My emotions can be very large, and I do see where they get away from me for the smallest thing sometimes, the smallest trigger. And I said to her, maybe I'm just doing it wrong. And she looks at me and she goes, "You're autistic." And I was like, okay. And I told my friend, I told my mom, told my couple other friends. And I was like, okay. Because I'd kind of already accepted it at that point.
Okay. So there was no struggle then. You find this out and there was really no struggle with it at all.
For the first day and a half.
Okay.
And then I had a full meltdown.
Okay.
I'm just like,
tears.
Okay. I was just depressed, I was like, am I I don't. I've been told more and more often in my adult life as I've let more of myself out, that I'm different, that I'm not normal. I wrote a blog post that you read about being on pedestals.
Yes.
Because people are scared of me. They're intimidated. I remember messaging somebody on Twitter once just to thank him for always being so kind with his words and compliments on my poetry. And he's like, I'm starstruck right now. And he told me, he's like, you intimidate me. I'm like, dude, you live in England, like, and you've never even seen my face. Like, how do I scare you? And you know, my mentor.
Well, you probably have some sort of celebrity status among a lot. I mean, for those who are listening, Lauren White's Twitter feed is absolutely amazing. And I can see that. No, I'm quite honest is what I am. And I can understand that. I can actually understand that guy in England being, you know, I'm not, you know, intimidated by you. But I do recognize and acknowledge your talent. But for someone who maybe they're not a writer themselves, maybe they're not any sort of an artist themselves, I can see them being a little starstruck. I can see them putting you on that celebrity pedestal. I can totally see that.
Well, sometimes it's disheartening because
why is that?
You just want to be a cool, semi-normal friend, right? And so sometimes when people have this consistent fear of you or this intimidation of you, or they're afraid to talk to you or be with you, the friendship is not quite what you want, right? It's you're the person. I was telling the examiner this. I've gone from being the person that people ask for their homework to the person people ask for the honest advice, because what I'll say to you is, do you want the honest answer? Or do you want the brutally honest answer? And then they don't need you anymore. And when people are scared of you, they can't quite make that connection that is going to result in them staying.
Well, I think the world is full of people who lack self-confidence. And I think those are the people who will fear you. They'll see your talent, they'll see your abilities, and because they lack some elements of confidence in themselves, they will fear you, and they'll put you on that pedestal, but they will distance themselves in a way, the true kinship of friendship will not be there because they're lacking something in themselves. But I feel a kinship with you because I'm also an artist and somewhat of a writer with my lyrics and not somewhat, I am a writer with my music lyrics and whatnot. So I have a kinship with you where my admiration for you is nothing. There's no element of fear or intimidation in that. So maybe it's not so much to do with you, but it's from the standpoint of the person who is admiring you.
And that's what's hard for me to accept. And that's where I'm going with this thought process. The irony in that is my self-confidence is very low. One of my friends, she said she calls her stepdaughter a coconut. And she's like, you're kind of like that hard exterior. And you get to the inside and it's just like, it's just a mess in there.
Yeah, but it's soft and sweet too.
And my mentor, he's like, I am somebody that knows you pretty well. Yeah. And most people fit in some sort of box. You fit in no box. And I've always struggled with this concept of being different because a lot of the things I do are things that I feel like everybody should do or everybody could do. And there's that part of me that lacks esteem in that I don't feel like I've done anything special. And so that's where that self-deprecation comes in. And
but you do see
my humor.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It comes out a lot in my humor, that self-deprecation. So, as I'm processing this autism and how I don't always like to be thought of as different or not normal. Like, I just want to be like your kind of cool, quirky friend, you know? And I thought, is this because my mind's broken? Is this because there's something wrong with me, and there's always been something wrong with me that I can't fix? But
autism does not equal wrong.
No, it doesn't. And I just had to have my little meltdown over it.
Yeah, depression doesn't equal wrong. PTSD does not equal wrong. Anxiety is not wrong. It's different because not everyone has those things to deal with, and there are some people who do have those things to deal with, but they choose not to deal with it. So I would say the person who has those things to deal with and then actually deals with it is to be, there should be a recognizing of their strength.
Yes. And that's something that I have to talk to myself.
Yes. You should recognize your strength in all of this.
And
it would do you well. It would do you well it would do you well to recognize it. It
would. And that's me. Sometimes it takes me a couple days to process things. That's why I couldn't write about it right away. I was talking to my friend about it. I was reading the report and looking at words like social communication disorder or TALK-AT, and I'm just like, is there, like, have I been broken and messed up this whole time and we just didn't know? And I had a little mini breakdown, and I was talking to my mom, and I cried because I was just like, that's how I felt was broken, not right. And I got it out, and I was like, okay, remember before when you were embracing this, let's go back to that. And I bought a couple of the books that the examiner had suggested. And weirdly, I actually, in the report, she said something about talking at the examiner. And I actually sent her an email saying, did I talk at you? I am so sorry. And she goes, Lauren, no, like, this is feedback. Like, you don't have anything that you need to apologize for. Right. But I was, so internally like, did I really come off that way? Was I unkind? Was I rambling? And so I had to process all through that and just kind of get to this place where, like, this is how you've always been and how you've always talked to people. And 2020 has taken the filter off my mouth in an epic way. And it's like, you know what? That's okay. People like that and even the examiner has said she's like, you'd be such an inspiration to girls.
Sure.
And
you'd be a
my
great
mentor and I have talked about that.
Yeah, you'd be a great motivational speaker.
So and so that's something that my mentor gave me for homework, because we actually, before all this happened, like a couple months ago, I was like, maybe I should be a motivational speaker. And he said, now, like, with knowing this, a late diagnosis of the autism plus your entire journey, that would be great for you to talk about. So he gave me homework, and he's like, so start putting together a presentation, a talk that you could maybe do that so I can look at it. I'm like, fine. So I sent him the blog posts, and he actually thought it was very well written too. He thought it flowed very well. And he said, I can see that being a presentation that you give.
How long after, let me just ask you real quick, how long after you got the diagnosis was that blog post? It was just a few days, wasn't it? The
diagnosis was Friday. I don't think I was able to write about it until...
Because the blog post was a couple days, 2 days ago, wasn't it?
Wednesday. I think it was Wednesday night.
Wednesday night,
I did it.
Yeah.
I took a few shots and went for it.
so it was Friday then that you got the diagnosis. You had to
Friday I got the diagnosis.
You processed that, and then for a few days, and then you sat down and wrote about it.
Yes.
And therein lies the rawness of that blog post, because it was so fresh. I mean, it was literally less than a week.
And there's a point when in processing, at least for me, where, as I was saying earlier, I can't write. If there's too much in my head, and I'm trying to navigate it. It's not going to come out in words yet. That would be a mess. And if I posted whatever that was, like, people would have me committed or something like, but then even, I talked with my therapist about it. I kind of processed it. Then I talked with my psychiatrist about it on Monday. And, I actually told her some other things that she said that's a very common symptom. Oh. One of the things that I wrote about, which was strange, was, when I told my mom about this, she said, and my mom immediately, will start researching everything. She's very great about that. And she said, so maybe this is why you always stared at me, in the crib and didn't cry when I would come and check on you. Huh. And she's always told me that, like, as a baby, I was born premature, about 2 months early. Oh. And they'd bring me home. I'd pretty much sleep through the night, and she'd come in to get me, and I'd be wide awake. I wouldn't cry, wouldn't move. I would just be looking at her. Yeah. And she put me to bed, check on me an hour or two later, and I'd be in the bed just staring at the ceiling. And as a baby, she'd put me down, and people thought I was a doll baby because I didn't move. And that's how my parents thought babies were until my brother came along and destroyed everything in his little warpath. Like, you can see, if you look at pictures of him crawling, like, you just see mischief. Yeah. And apparently my aunt told her, now you have a real baby, because I just wasn't that kid.
Is there anyone else with autism in your family that you know of?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Maybe, because it probably comes from somewhere. But
that's what they say. Isn't that something that can?
It can be genetic. Yeah, It can be because I was premature. Yeah. Is something I was reading. Yeah. And so when I told my doctor that, she's like, "That's actually an early sign of autism." And I was like, "Really?" And I texted my mom. She called me. She's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah. Who would have thought? Like, me being a good baby." Yeah. Because
isn't a lot of it, it's a different way of processing information. Is that not part of what it is?
It was a different sort of social interaction.
Exactly.
I guess.
Exactly. So that baby thing, if we can call it that baby thing of crying for attention and things like that, it didn't manifest itself in you.
No, it had to be if I really needed something. Yeah. Other than that, like, I was just chill. and so it's funny because that was a positive for my parents, right? Like, they would just, sit here, don't move, do what you do. And then my brother was the complete opposite. So trying to process that, those signs that were there at a couple of months that we didn't know to look for, that my parents didn't understand was a thing. It was just like, oh, this is our first kid. So that's what they do. Okay. And then now later to be like, oh, was that something we should have paid attention to? So, that's probably a burden on them too. So in addition to learning about it.
Sure. Absolutely. A lot of parents I read about parents having guilt feelings when their child has autism. And I think that is the parents not quite understand. I think it's people, it's society not understanding what autism is. You can't parent autism onto your child.
Right.
It's just something that is. Has your mother expressed any, oh gosh, I wish I would have raised you differently, or oh gosh, I wish I would have disciplined you differently, now that she knows that you have and have had your entire life autism?
Not as far as the autism, more the depression. And not a change in the way of being raised or anything like that. Just, we didn't know.
She probably just wishes she did know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so now, the good that she's able to do is she tells me she sees it in other children now, and she'll look at them and be like, that's you. And she'll say, hey, maybe you need to, have them talk to somebody or do this. And so that's good that she's able to do as a parent and share that information, because now, now she understands what it looks like. Whereas, they didn't know these weird things that I did, like,
especially with you being the firstborn, they had nothing to compare to.
Right. And there's no parenting manual. Every kid's different. Yeah. So, I was the one that didn't talk to people. I was super shy, and kids would be playing over here, and my mom said she'd find me over here somewhere because I had to reset my brain. That's what I'd say to her as a child. I still do that. You have me in noise for about 2 hours. No, like, I will turn belligerent if you do not let me get out, because it's sensory overload for me. Sure. You click a pen, I am going to punch you in the throat. It's these little things that are symptoms of sensory overload, that I just it's not like level 2 or level 3 sensory overload, but there are things that trigger me. Yeah. And like and I've been in a meeting where somebody's clicking a pen, and I'm immediately just like on edge. I start cringing because I'm like, where is that noise coming from? Yeah. And that combined with being introverted, which with me, people also don't understand because of, again, how you accommodate yourself in the workplace and around people. In the workplace, I got my hammer in my back pocket. I'm not playing with you. Okay. and people have learned that about me, especially with the sort of a job that I do. I just don't always make friends with people. They're like, we've been doing it that way for 10 years. I'm like, that's great. Here's how you're going to do it now. And I'm like, I don't care what you think. Yeah. Okay. This is what's going to happen now. And so, Are you
in a supervisory position at your job? I know you're working from home now, but no, you're not. You're not a supervisor.
Not a supervisory, but I tend to be. I have been in lead positions, engineering positions. And so this could be a whole other podcast discussion about trying to navigate being a Black woman in an engineering field, and being assertive and forward, and not being this angry Black person, Black woman, or not being the quote unquote bitch in the workplace. And then to find that I got. Say again?
I was going to say, that's a great podcast episode. We're just going to have to do that next time.
We might. And then to be navigating all of that this whole time and add autism onto that.
Are you going to tell your job?
Why? I don't hide it. No.
But you don't feel...
I don't hide a lot of other things, because I've been... taking your mental health day is really important, and people don't get that. It's like, oh, I'm sick, I have a cold, I'm not coming to work. And I've gotten into arguments with people. They're like, well, why would I jeopardize that, just because I have PTSD or something like that? I'm like, if you're out your mind, you're not good to anybody. Just like if you have the flu, you're not good to anybody. And I've told supervisors, I've walked into their office and I'm like, look, I may come in here and I may tell you I have to leave, and you just need to let me go. Yeah. Because I learned the hard way trying to work through it, as I would gradually shut down over the course of a few. And if I just take my day, my mental health day, and reset my brain.
That's that's good that you have the strength to do that. Not everyone will do that.
Well, then I can go back to work, and then I'm better for you than, just not being there over the course of several days. You have to be able to do that, and you have to be able to recognize it. It took me years to do that. So, now it's just kind of like, this plethora of things, and going back through some of my interactions with people and going, was that when that happened at work? Was it the autism? Was it the anxiety? Was it the introversion? Yeah. And so that's when I come home and I lay on the sofa and I watch cartoons under a blanket so I can just shut off my brain, because people think I'm weird for that. I'm like, first of all, cartoons are awesome.
Yes, they are.
I go to bed watching Adult Swim all the time. I have Boomerang now. So like one day I was just like watching the Smurfs. I was like mounting a TV and watching the Flintstones. Because that's how I bring it down. That's how I
There you go.
relax.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. Now that you have this diagnosis, which brings about a new understanding, I would assume, a new understanding of who you are and why you are who you are, is that going to change your life going forward? And if so, how?
So you asked me that earlier.
Yeah, but I
guess
didn't.
Answer it.
We kind of got off of the answer on that one, though.
I probably started to answer it, and it's
How is it going to change your life?
It's not.
Okay.
It's not going to change who I am. But it does give me some explanations of things and things to look for and watch. And I actually just started reading Autism in Heels by Jennifer Cook O'Toole. She just got she didn't get diagnosed with autism until she was 35. And so, I only read the first few pages, but I think what happens is it doesn't really change you going forward. It makes you go. It
explains things from the past.
And you're like, okay, now I get it.
So this sounds like you are in full acceptance then of this part of you. I don't want to put full on there because I'm still trying to understand it. Accepting, yes. Could I talk to people about it? Yes. I'm enjoying doing this podcast and thank you.
Going through the entire journey of it because it's a long one.
Sure it is. Yeah, you went around for 20 years before you even got into the depression and the understanding that and understanding the PTSD and whatnot.
And one of the things that we learned is that because we were so focused on the other things, doctors probably didn't think to look for the autism, which is what causes or can cause the anxiety or the anxiety, because you're not understood or not fitting in or not interacting with people in the way that you want to be. And so is it going to change me? No. I've kind of made a point of being who I am this year. I'm not really sure when that started. I don't know. I just stopped caring. And usually people get to 50 or 60 when they're old and crotchety and they're like, I don't care what I say anymore.
Well, could it be the release? Could it be the release, your first book release, that kind of, because that's quite an expose when you put your inner thoughts, when you put your poetry and maybe some elements of your journals out there like that. That's quite exposing.
I think it's me finally working on accepting me.
Okay.
And self-love is difficult. Even the examiner said that. And I'm
sorry, what's difficult?
Self-love.
Self-love, yes.
And
yes, it is.
One of my continual conflicts is I'm very left and right brained. Very dualistic in my personality. Sometimes I think there's something to that Gemini astrological sign because I feel two-faced half the time. And so it's fighting the Vulcan half of my brain that says
Star Trek reference. Hello.
Hello. Live long and prosper. It's fighting that Vulcan rational, logical part of my brain that says there's nothing wrong with you. Everything is okay. You don't need to feel this way or that way. Yeah. Just be. With that soft human half of my brain that can't get there with those words. Yeah. And I say that to my therapist. I'm like, in my mind, I can be like, I'm awesome. That doesn't connect with my emotions sometimes.
I understand. I totally understand.
And so it's getting there, and
it's a tiring situation to be in.
Yes, and you hate it because you're like, why can't I just be happy? Sometimes you're like, can I just feel happiness? And that was one of the questions on one of the autism exams I took is, do you remember what happiness feels like? And I was like,
oh boy,
no. And that was a lot. And so that's the change that I hope comes out of this. It's the change that I've been working on before this diagnosis.
Yes.
It's just something that adds to understanding of myself.
Sure.
Is, I'm okay. I got a few things going on. I've been diagnosed with half the alphabet. It's who I am, and just trying to work on getting that logic and the emotion to kind of mind meld with each other here. Yeah. And there are other parts of that play in with, being an empath. That's one of the first things Tiffy told me is you're an empath. And another Star Trek reference, kind of a Deanna Troi, but I don't really like people that much. And so when you're just kind of I put in my Twitter bio, misanthropic empath, because sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to deal with anybody, but I care, and I can't let you fall apart if I see that happening, and trying to understand that that's just me.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. That's a beautiful. Okay. You don't like people, but you don't want to see them crumble.
Yeah, I can't help it.
Yeah.
So I'm continually disappointed with them and myself. It's and my mentor is the same way. So we talk about it because people gravitate toward you. And so the last podcast, Tiffy was saying, we collect broken toys. And so it's funny because I feel like a misanthrope sometimes. I'm like, I just don't want to deal with you. But if you come to me with something, which I've realized, when relationships end and people just cut you off, even if I'm like kind of over you, I don't know. I don't know how to not help you. And
I'm experiencing that at the moment with yes, no, I feel you. I totally feel you on that one. Absolutely.
So there's a lot of acceptance and things to love about myself, the introvert, the empath, the autism, and just all these other things that are making this full picture of me that I haven't been able to really see, maybe because I've been hiding within myself for a really long time, and that little person in there is really trying to get back out.
Yeah.
And some people see her and some people don't. And I had a friend say to me, I think we've only seen glimpses of you up to now, but not really who you are. And I'm trying to let her out. Some people see her, and I keep trying to push her back in there. So I hope that understanding that comes from having this autism diagnosis and explaining just some things about the way that I am, I'm not broken. You're not just broken. Me, and
there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're just this, and different is a good thing. I think different is good just about 100% of the time. 95% of the time, different is a good thing. It's an interesting thing. There's something
and
you have
that
this
love.
Say again?
I said, and that's that love that we all need to get to. Yeah. And it's a little harder for some of us to get there because we think too much. And some people never really see themselves also. I think that's a flaw of the world.
But when you find someone, when someone comes into your life in whatever way, and it's someone whom you trust, and then when they tell you these things, when they tell you that you're different, but that's a good thing. And when they say, you're complicated, but I enjoy that, those are the people you should listen to. Those are the people's thoughts about you that you should try to emulate. And then there you will experience the self-love.
Yeah. And you got to clean your house of everybody else.
Got to clean your house of everybody else. Absolutely. You know, you should really look into this thing about being a motivational speaker. I believe that you could change people's lives if you get out there on a platform, whatever that platform may be, some sort of traveling lecture or whatever it is. I truly believe you could change people's lives. And that process, you're welcome. And that process of changing people's lives will lead to a certain type of growth that you will feel within yourself. It will be a growing and a learning process for yourself. So at the same time as you're helping others, you're also helping yourself to grow and to develop. And
some fulfillment.
You'll find a new understanding of yourself.
Mm-hmm. It would be fulfilling work, because I think that's when I'm happiest are things that are meaningful like that. I'm not a surface level person, and these are things that are way, way below the surface.
Sure. Well, you have a lot of depth. You have a lot of depth. Let me ask you, you're there in Florida. Let me just, let me wind this up. But I just have one question. You're in Florida. What is your daily life like? Is it as crazy there with the COVID situation as I see on the news?
Well, the pandemic isn't happening here, right? There is no COVID in Florida.
What's that governor's name? DeSantis?
Yeah.
Something else.
That guy. I try and live my life as normally as possible. So yes. I'd say what we're doing in Florida is good and bad. Because of many of these things that we've just discussed, I cannot lock myself in my house. I will lose it.
So what do you do?
The 1 month of lockdown was hard. I live
what
precautions?
What precautions do you take?
I don't touch anything, definitely. I've gotten in the habit now of opening everything with my shirt.
Yes, I use my sleeve. I use my sleeve because it's cold over here, so long sleeve, so I just use my sleeve to open doors.
I go to the gym. I do gym class, and LA Fitness has actually set up their classrooms with 6-foot circles, which for some people seems to just be a suggestion. But I try to be in the center of my circle.
Are you masked up?
You wear masks through the gym. I wear gloves because I only do the classes. I usually do steps. I wear gloves to take down the equipment.
Sure.
I don't use any gym equipment because
you're just there for the group class.
I go and do the classes and I touch what I need to in there with my gloves. I can't wear the masks because I have asthma, which actually does put me in a high risk category. And sometimes with the masks, I cannot breathe. Like if I have to talk to you a lot, it will trigger my asthma. So I wear the mask, outside, but I can't do anything strenuous with it. Okay. And you can take it off during a workout, just make sure everybody gets away from me.
The distance,
there are some things that you kind of wonder why we didn't do all the time. I wear gloves at the gas pump now, and then I look at the glove and I'm like, this is disgusting. Like, why haven't we been doing this all the time?
Yeah.
I had to fly home to Maryland because we had some family emergencies. And I sanitized the seat, wiped it down. I had sanitizer all over myself. I got home, surprised my parents. I was like, don't touch me. Jumped in the shower, took everything off, put it all to be, and we kind of kept our distance for a few days until it was like, all right, I'm fine. Yeah. Because I have asthma and I tend to have symptoms that are reminiscent of COVID, or if I get very tired and run down, I have symptoms that are reminiscent of that. I go get tested. I've been poked in the brain 3 times now. So far, I've been fine. I'm doing it again tomorrow. My friend is getting married Sunday, so going to get tested and check. It's not hard.
It's really not.
Is what I've told people. It's not hard to wear a mask, be considerate, be careful, sanitize. And I'm fortunate enough that I can go to the gym and go to the store and go to Pilates class. And only thing I'm not doing is going to work because we work in an enclosed space and we all use the same door. And we've had a lot of cases where I work. So I And a lot of
Probably
people have to go into the office. So I don't go there. But other than that, like, I've been pretty much able to do everything. I'm just very careful about it.
So it's probably good for you then to be at home with, I know you kind of go a little bit crazy. You said earlier you'd rather be at the office to work, but it's probably good to not be at the office then.
Yes, because I can't control that.
Right, exactly.
Sitting in close proximity to people. Whereas if I'm out, like, I can at least kind of get away from you, and I have my mask on, but I do see sometimes, because we've been open since May, right? Like, and people just kind of do what they do down here. My friend and I went to a little arts and craft festival, and we had our masks on and sanitizer, and we just looked at all the people. They had the vendors split apart, and we just looked at all the people that were crowding a bar without their masks and whatnot. We're just like, what's wrong with you?
Well, we're doing okay, and keep on doing okay. Take care of yourself and stay healthy. Listen, I know you have another appointment you have to get to, but before you go, I want to tell people they can check out your website, thepoeticengineer.com. And from there, they can find information about both of your books. They can check out your blog there. I strongly suggest and I didn't read your most recent blog post about music. I'm going to do that today. But the previous, the blog post before that, the one about how you were processing your new diagnosis of autism, I strongly suggest my listeners listen to that. It's a beautifully written piece, very insightful, very naked and raw. Well written. Thumbs up for that. I also want to tell people that by the time this episode comes out on Sunday, can we say that there will be links and you will be an official Loyal Oak artist? Will we have that up on the website by then in a couple of days, or is that maybe too soon?
Maybe too soon, but I will try my best.
We'll tell people then that it's coming. Lauren White is a Loyal Oak artist, and that just means that she's brought into the fold, and I'll be doing things to help promote her work. And she is a official Loyal Oak artist, and you will be able to see that on my website soon. Maybe not in a couple days, but soon, and I will make an announcement about that. And my website is johnallenpod.com. Lauren, thank you.
Thank you.
Much love. Much love to Tiffy also. She's the one that put me in contact with you. I miss her. She will be coming back to the Tiffy Tuesday series. It's going to be a while, but she will be coming back. But I'm so glad she hooked me up with you. I call you friend. I call you sister. I call you a fellow artist. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast for the second time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me again, John. Really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Okay, Lauren White, everybody. Bye now. Thank you and